Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant. Last week, Frontier announced the next 4 expansions for the Horizon season of Elite Dangerous. I made a video on one of those expansions, patch 2.2, called The Guardians, where I speculated that perhaps the patch may contain passengers. Now, patch 2.3 I want to talk about today is called The Commanders, and that features the character creation as well as multi-crew. We know a bit about both of those. It was discussed a bit at EGX, but we don't know any significant details, so I thought I'd make another speculative video to address the points we do know, as well as ask some questions about what potentially that expansion may contain. So it contains 2 very significant components, the character creation tool as well as multi-crew. The character creation tool we're about to use for all our existing commanders to at last create ourselves an avatar. Now, some people are perhaps curious as to what the point in that may be, because currently we don't have the ability to see our own character. And that's unlikely to change in Season 2 of Elite Dangerous. At least I can't see us getting up and being able to walk around so that we can see our own character in any form. But we will, however, be able to see other characters. Namely, of course, our friends or crew sitting inside our ship. And even at the moment, if we're down on a planet, we can see other players inside their SRVs. You can see them in their ships in space, but usually you're too far away and moving too fast to actually be able to notice. So the character creation tool, the video that we've seen so far, does show quite a significant variation in appearances. And it looks like there will be a lot of different options to be able to adjust and change our character's look. One other thing that was noticeable in the character creation video was the changing of the suit's colour. Now, I'm actually curious whether this will be a function built into the creation tool that players will have access to, because otherwise it seems that Frontier could well be missing a beat on this, and that they could perhaps use the suit colours as a microtransaction, much like at the moment we can change the ship's colour through paint jobs purchased through the online store. Even basic colour changes need to be made as a purchase, so it's perhaps an area that Frontier could make a little bit more money on if they decided to sell suit colours or suit skins or whatever you want to call it. Personally though, I hope all those colour variations are built into the creation tool itself and we can use whatever we want without any additional charges. Now, talking about variations in what we get to wear, could this perhaps be a part of NPCs? Patch 2.1 of course is going to feature the first visible NPCs we can see in character form as both mission givers and engineers. It's going to be interesting to see how far the customization goes on all of these. Clearly, the amount of mission givers there's going to be in the game, they will need to be procedurally generated, although I believe the engineers may well be handcrafted, as initially there's only going to be 30 of them. But to give them a bit of uniqueness, they'll each have their own backstory and their own personality. But will that extend to these clothes they wear? Could each minor faction perhaps have their own procedurally generated uniform, for example? That might be a lot to ask, because obviously there are many thousands of factions within the game, but it would be great to have some variation as you fly from station to station and feel that as you're moving around things are changing a bit, as opposed to all characters, no matter where you are, all wearing the same sort of suits. We'll have to see how that goes, but obviously there's some huge potential there. Now, multi-crew itself is filled with possibilities, but there's also a number of limitations, namely of which the multi-crew will not be able to be NPC. And in a lot of ways that's quite unfortunate, because back during when multi-crew was first announced, there were a lot of comments expressing the hope and desire for an NPC crew. But of course it does all hinge and depend upon what sort of gameplay Frontier have planned for the multi-crew. In regards to that, there's essentially zero information, but there were a few comments made on the Frontier livestream over the Christmas period. And these were either made by Adam Woods or Eddie Simons, I can't quite remember, but essentially what happened is that they were taking a Q&A during their livestream, and they were asked a question of what sort of gameplay would be in the multi-crew. And their response was that the other players would be able to control functions of the ship, allowing the pilot to fly without having to worry about these functions. For example, the co-pilot would be able to plot a course on the galaxy map, whilst the pilot retains control of the ship, or the co-pilot could control power distribution, or perhaps even weapons. And it seemed at the time that this was the only information they were willing to give, which essentially just boils down to the ability of other players being able to control functions of your ship. Nothing spoken about in specific to gameplay then. So hopefully that's something that will be announced at some point. Hopefully there will be further details on that. After all, it would be quite a shame to have a multi-crew at last, only to be confronted with the exact same gameplay we already have. However, the very fact that we can have other people on the ship would shake things up quite considerably in many respects. Firstly, the other players would be able to control your ship-launched fighters, which should make for some quite interesting dynamics. And although, as far as I'm aware, there's been no word on it, I would like to see the ability for other players to be able to control your and drive your SRVs as well. Now, how this all works in practice is somewhat of a curiosity actually. In terms of the ability to travel across the galaxy, Frontier have always stuck with as much realism as possible, in that they don't like you just jumping about from one location to another without actually having to travel there yourself. So you can't just instantly teleport to another station just because you've got a ship parked there. Yet how is this going to work with multi-crew? Will we have to travel out to our friends and meet up with them so we can board their ship? Or will we at last be able to get the ability just to instantly travel to their ship, just teleport there by some sort of menu? After all, we could have someone we want to join up with who's on the opposite side of the galaxy, maybe 30,000 light years away. I'd very much like the ability to just join someone's ship no matter where they are or where I am in relation to each other. Putting limitations on how and when we can access other people's ships could well prove to be somewhat of a disappointment for a lot of people if those limitations turn out to be too strict. My hope, though, is that if in a future the Distant Worlds expedition, for example, there could be a whole fleet on the opposite side of the galaxy, and someone at last moment could think, hey, I want to go along and play with them for a little while, and then they would just be able to jump straight into a friend's ship and drive about in one of their spare SRVs or launchable fighters. Of course, though, the whole concept of multi-crew really does bring up the whole question of instancing. Now, instancing has had its high points and low points during the past few years during Elite Dangerous, whereas right at the start it was really bad and caused some huge problems. It eventually was smoothed out so wings could basically be formed up and could be retained together quite effectively throughout pretty much an entire play session. But over the last few months, instancing has got quite bad. It's now very common for a member of a wing or a number of members of a wing, or even people sharing the same instance, to just simply vanish from each other's view and find themselves in a new isolated instance. This is something that's been happening with the groups I've been playing in on the Distant Worlds expeditions, and I know it's affected a lot of other players under all different sorts of circumstances throughout the Elite Galaxy. And the other thing that's quite common as well is variations on rubber banding. If you've been in groups or wings with other players for any amount of time, you will no doubt have seen at some point them juddering backwards and forwards or up and down, or their ship just doing very strange acrobatics. And this, of course, is usually down to some type of networking issues. So how will all of this affect multi-crew? I certainly don't want to be in a friend's ship only for them or their ship to disappear, and I certainly don't want to be sitting in the co-pilot seat only to find myself rubber banding all over the place. It's a challenge that Frontier are no doubt very much aware of and facing right now, and I'm sure eventually, one way or another, they will get it fixed. But at the moment, it's a question that just cannot be ignored when discussing multi-crew. Overall then, patch 2.3 follows on well from 2.2 and 2.1 in that it adds a whole bunch of characterization to the galaxy. And once both NPC and player-made avatars are in the game, the next question really does become, when are we going to be able to walk around? As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time. Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant, and I'm here today to take a look at a very little snippet of news that we've recently got from Frontier that hints at the future of Elite Dangerous. And although it's only one sentence, it potentially gives us an idea of passenger missions and what it may entail. So this is a speculation video and what we may get in Elite going forwards.